Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just start by giving you a quick overview of the humanitarian situation, and then I'll hand over to Jordan Ryan from UNDP. First of all, I think the overall picture is that we are making progress, but we're also still very conscious that there's a very long way to go to get to all the people in need with some of the basic items. So we're very conscious that we have a lot to do yet. Just going through some of the main areas, the search and rescue operation, as you know, is winding down, but some teams will still remain for some time to come, not least to help with recovering bodies and if there are any other possibilities of finding people alive. The latest figures I have suggested that there were 67 teams, no less, search and rescue teams there at the peak, but of course people are beginning to leave now, and that was almost 2,000 people from the international side. On the main categories of need, on the water side, I think we are making progress. As I said before, I think there are still issues there, particularly outside Port-au-Prince, but the water situation is less acute than it was before. I think most people have got some access to water, and we're increasing the coverage that we are able to give. So that is less critical, although I don't want to give the impression that it's at all solved. Another related issue there we need to focus a lot on is sanitation, and of course sanitation and hygiene, because otherwise the risk of disease is there. And by the way, on the disease front there is no sign of any epidemics at the moment, although the surveillance of that is continuing very intensively. On the food side, we still have a lot to do, as you'll all be aware. I think the World Food Programme have served out 10 million meals so far, and are reaching more people every day, both inside Port-au-Prince and outside. But again, we're conscious that there are very many people who have not yet had food rations. As I was saying in Montreal yesterday, and I'm sure you heard yesterday from the head of the World Food Programme, Josette Chiron, there's a major effort underway to get tens of millions of ready-to-eat meals to get into Haiti in the next 2 or 3 weeks to deal with this basic food load nutritional problem. Because people don't have cooking facilities at the moment. Obviously, as soon as that situation eases and people have cooking facilities, or we can set up communal kitchens, then the attention will switch to more normal rations, rice, pulses, oil, sugar, salt, the usual things. But we're not quite at that stage yet, given the basic lack of infrastructure and food that we've had to deal with at the beginning. So again, a long way to go there. On the medical side, the emergency operative side is beginning to wind down. The caseload is reducing. Many people have had operations, but we're also very conscious that people need post-operative care. They need intensive care in some cases, and there are still supply issues about some basic drugs which we're trying to tackle. The number of medical facilities on the ground, both in Port-au-Prince and outside, again is improving significantly, but there are issues with where people are going to go as they recover from their operations. I mean, I think people are beginning to set up those extra facilities insofar as we can do that quickly. And of course there will be longer term issues about how to deal with a large number of amputees. And I should also not forget the psychological problems people are going to have after a disaster of this magnitude and this horror, and we need to focus on that too. Shelter is a major priority, as we've discussed before. We need to make sure that people have as quickly as possible, first of all, better rudimentary shelters, if I can put it that way, in terms of plastic sheeting, tarpaulins, to improve the coverage they've got at the moment. But of course, as quickly as possible, we want to get as many tents as possible in there, and we're working on that. I mean, there are a certain number of tents in stock and being distributed, but I think there's another 40,000 or so on the way. And as President Preval said yesterday, he estimates that 200,000 family-sized tents may be needed. That may well be right, because we're talking about between 800,000 and 1 million people displaced. And if you imagine each tent covering 5 people, then you quite quickly get to the figure of 200,000. So we still have a long way to go on that. This is linked with the question of camps. What kind of camps, where should they be? The shelter cluster is discussing a strategy on that with the government today, following intensive discussions over the last few days. This is something we need to get right. It's not something we can rush into, because we'll have to live with the consequences of getting the camps wrong in terms of structures and locations and management. But we want to start that process more systematically as soon as we possibly can. So shelter is is a very major priority for us. And as I was saying to the meeting in Montreal yesterday, we're very conscious that we'll need probably an intermediate shelter solution as well as tents to deal with the rainy and hurricane seasons before people can get back into either their own homes once repaired or more permanent housing. Otherwise, what's now underway as well is a full-scale interagency intercluster needs assessment, so we can get a better handle on the extent of the needs in Port-au-Prince, in the cities affected by the earthquake outside Port-au-Prince, but also in the country more widely, where people have left Port-au-Prince and gone to other locations. We're trying to find out where they are, in what numbers, what they need, what the local communities supporting them need, and therefore what the overall needs are, and that's designed to feed into the revision of the flash appeal, which we're planning for 3 or 4 weeks' time, as we said before. Just a word on that, outside Port-au-Prince, I think we are beginning to reach more people, but again, it's another area where we have a long way to go. We've established offices ourselves in Jacmel and Léogâne, which are 2 of the worst affected cities, and others are beginning to establish themselves there too. On the logistics side, nothing, I think, very new to report. The airport continues to function with between 100 and 150 flights a day, and the arrangements for prioritizing humanitarian cargo are working better and better, I would say there. We now have also a joint operations tasking center inside in Port-au-Prince, bringing together the peacekeeping mission, the humanitarians, the other military actors on the ground, everybody concerned to make sure that the tasking is as clear as possible, and that's beginning again to help with the smooth functioning of the whole system. On the security side, again, not much change to report. The overall situation is reasonably calm, but there are incidents from time to time. Some of the distributions have problems, as you've probably seen from the media, and we're trying to ensure that the process is as smooth as it can be in the circumstances. On the funding side, the flash appeal itself is now 49% funded. That's with committed funds. And if you include the uncommitted pledges, which in this particular case we will certainly expect to be turned into proper contributions very quickly, then the amount is 60% funding. So we're beginning to get there on that front, but we're still particularly concerned about some key areas which are very underfunded. Early recovery, cash for work, I think is now at 8%, and I'm sure Jordan will say a bit more about that. Other areas like education, agriculture, and even nutrition and water and sanitation are still not receiving the kind of percentage of funds that we want to see, given the scale of the need. Let me just finish on Montreal yesterday, where I was together with Edmund Moulet, the acting special representative of the Secretary General, and Helen Clark, the administrator of the UNDP, who has now left for Europe. I think it was a good meeting. There was a wide agreement amongst all concerned there, both the countries represented, the regional organizations represented, and the international side, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the Inter-American Development Bank, on the kind of process we now need to start leading up to the proposed conference here in March in New York, hosted by the US. Obviously a lot of emphasis on local ownership, local leadership by the Haiti government, involvement and empowerment of the Haitian people as far as possible. A lot of emphasis on this idea of creating livelihoods, jobs, getting cash into people's pockets through cash for work. Again, I think a major focus there. But on the humanitarian side, the emphasis was on listening to the presentations from me and from a number of Canadian NGOs which were also there. The focus was more on planning for the next stage, the reconstruction, redevelopment, and so on. So let me stop on that note, and I will hand over to Jordan to pick up the running from there. Thank you.
Well, on the Montreal conference, as Mr. Holmes has said, I think very good opportunity for a number of actors to get together, chaired by the Canadian Foreign Minister. The Prime Minister was in attendance. A number of foreign ministers from the concerned states were there, including from France and the United States, as well as from Latin America. The meeting did begin with listening to the NGOs. Many have operations on the ground, and were, I think, hearkening for both the need for continuing to focus on the humanitarian emergency as well as to plan well for the reconstruction efforts. I think a very important set of statements from the Prime Minister of Haiti, who was in attendance, that did call the situation still very much an emergency, listed many of the issues that Mr. Holmes has listed in terms of the urgent needs, including the needs for shelter and tent and for food, but did make a strong case for the work that the government is doing in terms of exerting the ownership over the entire process and working well with a number of actors. The meeting also heard in detail from the acting SRSG, both on the situation on the ground as well as advancing the issues of greater coordination, and then each of the representatives that the foreign ministers spoke. And I think the recurring messages that we heard were one of, yes, we've got to pay attention to the immediate emergency, but we should now seize the opportunity to begin the plans for the long-term reconstruction. I think there was almost unanimous agreement that this is not a 1-2 year process. Member states will have to be engaged with the international community on a long term in the rebuilding of Haiti, in a sense, the building up of Haiti. I think several other points came up very clearly. This need to use early recovery, sometimes called cash for work, but it's a bit broader than early recovery because it's, in a sense, the restoration of national authority after the disruption by the earthquake. It's getting people back to work as quickly as possible. That needs to be funded. It's typically not funded in these flash appeals. There needs to be much more attention to get that working and working well. Already there is cash for work underway cleaning up rubble. It's only got about 5,000 employed right today, but by the end of the week we hope it's 10,000. We hope, in a sense, that it will be scaled up as we get more resources into that food for work. So, priority on early recovery. It helps build stability. It helps build a sense of security. It clearly helped build a sense of hope for people that have been struck by this natural disaster. The second key point that I think was made by many, this is a unique opportunity to help Haiti build back better. It sits on a tremendously volatile tectonic plate. There's some seismologists that will tell us that Haiti will be subject to earthquakes in the future of intensities like what it saw. So it has the opportunity, in a sense, to build back better. Experts tell us that the additional cost to build back better, earthquake resistant up to a certain standard, are clearly doable. Some say it's not much more than 5% of what the normal construction would be. The commitment, in a sense, to build back better was also discussed by foreign ministers, that it's an opportunity to have a greater inclusion in the development process by the Haitians. It's an opportunity, in a sense, for a democratic renewal that was well underway. Another key point made is that Haiti, before this natural disaster, things were certainly looking much better than they had in the recent past. In a sense, an opportunity to seize and build on that. Clearly, moving forward, two big issues that we're working very closely with the Haitian government and the international community, the so-called post-disaster needs assessment. It's a process that brings together experts to look quickly at what the economic loss was, to have an assessment of what the physical damage is, and to bring in those that know a lot about economic recovery, in a sense, the access to social services that will be needed to put in place to make sure that the Haitian people recover and rebuild from this disaster. That process is done at the request of the government. It brings in both technical experts in a wide sectoral range of activities. We expect to have the first scoping team, which brings together the European community, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the United Nations on the ground no later than the 9th of February, and then a much broader, full-blown process we hope takes place well in advance of the conference. Very expedited time frame, because we hope to have the donor conference. I think the date hasn't been set, but people are talking at toward the end of March. But you want that, at least initial assessment, to be in front of the donor community so that they know what's needed. Other main discussion is that on funding, it will take enormous resources in addition to what's needed today for the emergency to help with the reconstruction. Clearly, the international financial institutions that were present will play a major role in that. And so there are discussions underway right now on the best mechanism, whether it's a multi-donor trust fund that's been used in other examples. How do you bring the best of the international financial institutions? Final point, I think very clear that we have learned some lessons from other natural disasters. Clearly, the importance of having government, the Haitian government, and its people very much in the lead of the process was agreed to by all. The need for that capacity of enhancing strong government leadership, certainly work that's underway already and will continue. Broad participation of actors. You have the Red Cross movement that does an enormous amount of work, generated a lot of resources through its appeals, needing to, in a sense, team up with the entire international community that's ready, willing, and able, I think, to help Haiti in new ways. And finally, I think there was a sense that we have an opportunity to be ruthless in terms of rooting out duplication by having a much more coordinated effort that does help ensure that who benefits from this assistance are the Haitian people. Thank you.